remember to subscribe and share. Australian musical theatre star Helen Walsh has performed around the globe in some of the biggest musicals of the last few decades. These musicals include Cats, Les Misérables, Wicked, Hello Dolly, and the show she's currently performing in Adelaide, Mary Poppins. Helen is here today to talk about, what else? Musicals. Helen Walsh, lovely to see you, and welcome to Noel Anderson's 15 Minutes of Fame.
Lovely to see you too. Thanks, Noel.
The last time we saw one another was over 20 years ago, and I think you've been doing either South Pacific or Hello Dolly. And I was directing a show at Belvoir Street, and we caught up in Stanley Street. Do you remember it all?
I don't actually, but if that was South Pacific or Hello Dolly, that was over 30 years ago, not just 20 years ago.
Oh my God, Helen. Then it is so long since we've spoken to one another. But you, of course, have been flying all over the world and doing a lot of shows. And I'm just going to read through some of the things you've done. So, of course, you're working at the moment on Mary Poppins, but you've done Les Mis, Man of La Mancha, The Wedding Singer, Sister Act, Candide, Wizard of Oz. You did The Sound of Music at the Palladium. You've also worked in Singapore. You've worked in Hong Kong. You've worked on a project with Andrew Lloyd Webber. You've also did Cats. It is huge, Helen. What do you think when you hear all those shows?
I think, God, I'm tired. What a long time to be doing those shows. But I'm actually just really, I've ticked a few boxes, I went to London 18 years ago and I didn't look back. And I got on the West End, started with The Sound of Music at the Palladium with Andrew Lloyd Webber, actually. And then Wizard of Oz also, with those shows that were on television and they, you had to vote in the lead and blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't stop working, and I'm just grateful because what an experience.
When you just said you had to vote in the lead, what did you mean by that?
Well, they had these television shows back in the early 2000s in England where they had the Nancy program and the Maria program, where they have girls who auditioned for the role of Maria, and they'd have to go, and Cameron McIntosh and Andrew Lloyd Webber would come on and people would vote them in. And so the television audience voted in these girls to play the leads. And I ended up doing the original production of The Sound of Music at the Palladium with Connie Fisher, who won that program. And then I ended up playing Auntie M at the Palladium with the girl who won the Dorothy program. So, it was all connected, these reality TV shows. It was the first time that they'd sort of used reality stars in musicals, and it was a success because the television audience recognised the people.
Did you at all at the time think you wanted to be a reality TV star? Did that pop into your brain?
No, I'm not a reality TV star. The girls that won the programs, I was just in the show with them. But and actually at the time, a lot of the old West End performers were really up in arms about it, because it meant it was kind of taking jobs away from the gigging actors, the people who were the reality stars. And it's very much gone that way now. But that has enabled us to all have more work, because the shows can go on if, they have recognisable people in the leads and people will come and see it.
Now, look, what I might try and do is just take a step back a little bit, because you're from Queensland originally.
Yeah.
When did you first start thinking about singing as a little girl? Do you remember much about that as a child?
Yeah, I remember watching, first it was Disneyland, and I remember the girl who played Cindy in the Brady Bunch was in this Disney thing, and I thought, oh, wow, and I used to sing along to the Disney songs. And then I was watching Young Talent Time and Tina Arena was singing something, and I started singing along, and my brothers and sisters went, oh, God, you can do that. And I went, everybody can do that. It's not just her and me. You can do it too. I didn't realise that not everybody could sing. I just did it. I don't know. Anyway, that's when they all sort of started saying, oh, you can sing. And I'm like, can I? I don't know. And then when I was about 14, a girl I went to school with was having singing lessons, and she said, why don't you come with me to my teacher? So we had these double singing lessons, and then at the end of that time, after 6 weeks or something, the other girl left, and the teacher pulled me aside and said, you need to come back to me. You can sing. And so my mum then made me have singing lessons for the rest of my years, and for my sins, here I am.
Do you know, I remember the first time I heard you sing, because we did a couple of shows together in Brisbane, and I remember the first time I I heard you sing, my breath was taken away from me because it was so beautiful to listen to. And whenever I think of great singers, I do think of you, Helen, because your voice is absolutely superb. And I remember we had to do a TV promo. I think it was for Channel 7 for the musical we were working on called Dames at Sea. We got there, and you might remember this, and the young guy who was playing opposite you forgot the words. Do you remember? And there was a look of absolute terror on your face, but somehow or other you kind of carried on and it all worked out okay. Do you remember that moment?
I don't remember that moment, but I remember that I had gone to school with him. His name was Peter. I can't remember his last name, but yeah, that was funny.
Well, he was very good looking. He had a very good voice.
Yes.
And it was and we were all very, very young and a little nervous, I think, at the time. Now, you're not originally from Brisbane, are you? You're from Toowoomba, is that right?
No, I studied in Toowoomba, but I was born in Gympie. So and I grew up at a little place called Woolooga, which is, north of Gympie, northwest of Gympie. And I've kind of inherited that property with my sister. So I kind of, when I come back to Australia, that's where I go, to the farm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you finished your uni course in Toowoomba, you then got a job at Movie World. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
What were you doing what were you singing at Movie World?
Well, for the first 2 weeks, I think it was, I was a chaperoning the big furry animals and stuff. And then there was a job going in the acting pool, and I auditioned for it and got it. And then I started singing in the park because we did New York, and we did different little acts around the place. So it wasn't really singing, it was more sort of street theatre, Bonnie and Clyde and, Cadence and things like that. But that was fun. That was a fun job. And we used to, sometimes after work, we'd have to stay and do functions. Then we just drive back to Brisbane, go to sleep, get up and come back and do the next day. It was just, I don't know, it's a different time, but it was fun there.
It was a different time. And what do you remember about yourself as a young singer in those days? How would you describe yourself back then?
Oh, naive and insecure and with stars in my eyes. Like I was just like, oh wow, everything was amazing. I remember getting into South Pacific, getting the phone call in the actual green room of the acting pool, and everybody standing around and screaming when I got the job. It was the first big show that I got. It was a Gordon Frost production. When I actually went to Melbourne with the show and opened it, I remember running onto the stage, and I was so nervous because I was only in the ensemble and I understudied Nellie Forbush eventually. But I was so nervous because it was in Melbourne, and I'd never been to Melbourne before that. Like, it was like, to me, Melbourne was big time, big city. And now when I think about how I've lived in London for 18 years and I've gone all around the world, and I just go, oh gosh, wasn't I a silly little country kid, just so naive and very country.
Would you describe yourself, Helen, as a gypsy? Because I think there has to be an element of that in you to kind of always constantly be moving. Because as I look at your resume, you've literally performed everywhere. Well, maybe not everywhere, but you've performed in a lot of places around the world. That can't always be easy doing that.
No, it's not. It's like living out of a suitcase. And as I travel back to London after this, probably early next year, I'll go back with 2 suitcases. Like, I've actually moved my stuff back here because it's so nomadic over there. You're either on tour or you're in another country, or so it's pointless setting up. I never really got to settle down over there. I was just there all the time working. So I kind of am a nomad in a way, a gypsy, I guess. But like I say, I'm glad that I still have the farm, because that is what anchors me to Australia. To me, that's home, and nothing else will kind of surpass that, I don't think.
That's right. I remember you bought a farm.
No, I grew up on that farm. It's been in my family for 100 years, yeah. And when my uncle passed away, he left a pretty substantial title of it to me, and I shared it with my sister and her husband. So, yeah.
So are they out there working on the farm, and you're traveling the world? Yes. That sounds like a very good deal, Helen.
I'm not stupid.
Here's a question for you. Now, it's a little personal. Does it get lonely on the road?
Extremely, yes. But I've always said, that song, Love the One You're With? It's a bit like that. You join a group of people in a show, and with, technicians and backstage and everyone, the whole band, we travel together, and you just go, okay, who are my people? Who am I going to hang out with? Who am I going to go to the pub with? Who am I going to go on adventures with? And you just, hang out with whoever's there and enjoy the people that are around you. And then when you move to the next show, you find the other people that enjoy doing the same things that you do, and just make it work like that. So I've lived like that. And it's funny because it feels like you're going from one family to another of show people to another family of show people. And you might take one or two people with you in your heart and go, oh, they're really good friends. But generally, it's such a nomadic lifestyle and everyone's kind of in the same boat.
Do you think anyone could do that? Or do you think you need to be a particular type of person to do that?
I think so. I think you need to have very few responsibilities. I think people who have children and have, lots of other family things going on and lots of other responsibilities or links to things that you can't just drop everything and go. So it's not for everyone, but I've enjoyed it thus far.
Here's a question for you. Would you classify yourself as a diva?
Define diva.
Well, I'm asking you to define diva. What's a diva, Helen?
Well, it can be a derogatory term. People can use it as a sort of like someone who's throws their weight around and tells people off. And, I certainly am not that person. Although, I have been tricky. There have been times when I admit I've been tricky. But I think you do that. Performing's difficult. Like you have to be in a certain headspace. You have to have everything going right around you in order to pull off something on stage that people are going to walk away and go, wow, that was great. But you have to be in that place. So sometimes being forthright and being honest, sometimes people don't see that as very nice. So I would say a diva is probably someone who just knows what she wants and your focus is there and you go for it. And if that means that people don't like you sometimes, that's their opinion, not yours or not the truth. It's just, But also a diva, I think, is someone who has extraordinary vocal skills and can just pull it off no matter what.
No, you worked with one of my favourite singers, which was Elaine Page.
Yeah.
It was in Singapore, or was it Beijing?
Beijing and Shanghai. The music of Andrew Lloyd Webber. Yes, she was. We did that concert for 5 weeks, and she didn't speak to us. I had a couple of solos as well as she had, obviously a lot of solos, but there were a few of us that had songs to sing and stuff. She never spoke to us until the very last night when Andrew Lloyd Webber had gone home, and we had this party in Shanghai in the sort of like nightclub sort of district, and she became a different person. She was like chatty and funny, and we all had photographs with her, and she'd tell stories and she'd take the piss out of Andrew Lloyd Webber, which is funny because like he's a nice man, but there are some stories that go with those two, over time, and it's all there's stories about her as well, that are all, you can't say sometimes, but yeah, she was interesting. But I guess when she was performing, she didn't feel like she could really relax and just chat with us until it was all over, and she did a good job because that particular concert went on to Really Useful recorded it, so it went out on CD and DVD, and to this day you can still buy it. But it was a bit of a big deal at the time, I remember. What
role would you love to do that you haven't had a chance to actually perform?
If Wicked had been around, and I've done Wicked, I've covered Misérables in Wicked in the UK, but if it had been around when I was young, when I was about 25, I would have loved to have played Glinda. That would have been probably, a bit of because it was a character comic with drama and with soprano and, just like, and belt. And it just would have been probably something that I could have done well, but it wasn't my time. That came after I was an ingenue. So it didn't really, I suppose that sort of thing. I don't know. These days, all I just play really old, fat, ugly parts with no singing or very little singing. Like I've done Madame Thénardier 3 times. I've done Les Mis probably 7 times, maybe 8 in my life, different productions for Cameron Mackintosh over like 20, 30 years or something. And, so I can play all the hags and, you just got to know what your casting ability is, like know what you're capable of and what you look like. And I can own that I'm no gorgeous, tall, leading lady. I'm short and I'm fat. And if I go into an audition wearing no makeup and looking like a bastard, I'll probably get the job.
Which reminds me, I've been trolling you on Facebook. Well, not really trolling you, but I was reading something you posted on Facebook about women and about weight and about having grey hair, and you posted this piece which was encouraging women to be warriors. Do you remember copying and pasting that on your Facebook page?
No, I don't. But I do like to champion that kind of thing, because why should we try and be young when we're not? We're growing old gracefully, and we should just own it and get on with it. And also, I do think that the media sells us short and tells young boys that what to expect, and their expectations are so unachievable to most girls. It's not fair. It's like, no, we've got to get back to real, and we have to get back to what's in our hearts, not what's on the outside. It's the inside. It's how we feel about each other and how we treat people. I'm a strong believer of that kind of thing. So, I guess I don't remember putting that on my Facebook, but that is something I probably would have shared, yeah.
So what do you think about Instagram? And because there are a lot of people now that are becoming stars simply by getting a lot of followers on Instagram. For those people, they have to make an effort in the way they look in order to get those followers. So talent versus beauty is kind of, you can become a star on Instagram if you've got the beauty, but you don't necessarily need the talent. What do you think about that?
I think that's just another avenue for people to become famous. I mean, you can have talent and not be famous. You can have talent and be an actress and never be a star. I just think that there's a place for those people, but I'm not interested in that. And I'm not interested in looking at, I've never seen the Kardashians. It's just not interesting to me. I just think, oh, how boring. Why would you want to plasticize your bum and you make out like you're this perfect individual when we're so not? None of us. Not one person on the earth is perfect and never will be, thank God. But it's just not interesting to me. I go, all power to them, because they work hard at what they do, but it's not for me. And I wish that the power came from people who were the opposite of that. I wish the world was embracing more of the other people.
So do you think we could change that perception through music and through theatre? Is that a possibility? Do you think possibly?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think we could do that? I mean, theatre's such a great storyteller, and you can really examine a lot of social issues through theatre. Is there a musical you think that really has something to say, through its music?
Oh, there's lots of musicals that have something to say. I mean, I don't know if the one's been written about that particular element, but we definitely, every time we go out on stage and we tell a story, we impact the audience, and it's meant to be like that. And I think, Mary Poppins, actually, that I'm in at the moment, the story's beautiful, and it's like she comes in and it's not, and everyone thinks she's there to fix and help the children, but she's there to help the father, because he's been grown up in a way that he's a broken man and he's treating his family badly. And once she's there to change his mindset and make him see the light, it changes the world around them, and everything becomes much more beautiful, and everyone's happier. And so that I think it's got a lot of heart, and there are many stories, many musicals that send those kind of messages. I can't pinpoint anything right now, but I'm sure if someone wrote an award-winning, something that was as big as Les Mis that had that message, then the whole world would stand up and take notice. But I don't know if it's going to happen.
Have you performed in any Australian musicals? And what I mean by that is a story set in Australia. You performed in musicals, that have been put together in Australia, but they're overseas stories. Have you performed in an Australian musical?
I don't think so, actually. No,
Does that annoy you a little bit that there aren't more Australian musicals? And why aren't there Australian musicals?
Well, because I think when people write Australian musicals, apart from, I was away when a lot of the ones that have been written, were being performed. So I never got to audition for them. I'm not part of this industry over here. So you're sort of not going to get that. Oh, no, I lie. There was one, Only Heaven Knows. I did a workshop for that and a performance of it in London. And the composer I know has passed away now, but his sister, I did Sister Act with at the Palladium. Yeah, that was an Australian musical. So, but you just don't get them over there. But over here, because I've been away, I don't know. I think sometimes people think the subject matter needs to be about the gold rush but it doesn't. Yeah, I think
it's very hard to sell an Australian musical here. And I'm speaking from personal experience. It's very difficult to sell an Australian musical because everybody wants to do Les Mis, wants to do Cats, They don't want to do an Australian musical. They want to do the big musicals everybody knows. So it's a very hard thing to do. So let's send love to anyone writing an Australian musical. I really think they need made it, Helen.
Well,
Now,
Peter Rutherford, well, he wrote an Australian musical. What was it called? Oh, my God. I can't remember. Anyway, it was very good. I remember that. That I do remember. Peter Rutherford and James Miller wrote it. Can't remember what it was called now. Anyway, yes, they are out there.
Only Heaven Knows was David Campbell ended up doing that here. So he did actually perform that here. Now, you've written on your, I think it's your Twitter account, over 30 years in shows and still having a laugh. That's what you said.
Yeah, it's true.
What
35 years, actually.
Is it 35 years? What makes you laugh now? Because doing a show 8 days a week is bloody hard work.
You know, I think you just have to be light about it and not take yourself too seriously and just enjoy it. It's about having fun anyway. And it's about doing the job and being professional. Work hard, play hard has always been my motto. So you will see me at the pub. I will be there with a glass of wine in my hand. And that's the joy of life, just enjoying what you're doing when you do it and then move on. So, you know, if you stuff something up on stage, don't dwell on it. Just get it right tomorrow.
That's very frightening, actually, when you stuff things up on stage. You do feel like you've let everyone down, don't you?
Yeah, you do. You do. But you've got to move on because you've got more moments to create and you can't be dwelling on what you've just done. You just have to get on with it.
Now, you're in Adelaide at the moment. You're doing Mary Poppins in Adelaide. And a little birdie told me that something very funny happened to you. And I think you were with Chelsea Plumley. And you were wandering around Adelaide. And I just wonder if you want to tell people listening to this that very funny tale.
Well, we were walking back from the cinema. We'd just been to see Indiana Jones, Chelsea and I. And we were at the lights about 2 streets up from where our digs are. And we were talking and we saw that the light was probably going to change in a minute. And we stepped onto the road. And as we took 2 or 3 steps, the light went green. However, as we crossed the road, a police car stopped us and Chelsea noticed first, and they said, "Oh, you just jaywalked. You went on a red light." And I was like, had my mouth open because I was like, "What? Did we? Oh my God!" And then he went, "Can you just come around the corner? We're going to have a little chat to you." And so this police car with these 2 policemen, a woman and a man, drove around the corner. We had to go up to the police car. I had to give all my address, my details. I had to get my passport out. They gave us a warning and told us it would have cost us, how much did he say? $150, I think we would have been fined.
Wow.
But we were just kind of warning. So we got half arrested for jaywalking in Adelaide at 8 o'clock at night.
It's a little bit conservative, isn't it, Adelaide?
It's unbelievable. I was like, did that just happen? And then so every time now we get to a light, we're like, I'm not walking, I'm waiting. And the lights are literally so slow here that it just takes you so much longer to get to work because you can't just flit across the road. You have to wait for the 5 minutes that the thing takes. So we nearly got arrested.
That's very funny.
It was funny.
You know, Adelaide is such... I was in Adelaide for the Adelaide Fringe, and it's an absolutely fabulous time to be in Adelaide. But it is a very conservative town. Do you notice differences in audiences if you're performing in Hong Kong, say, versus Adelaide, versus London, versus Melbourne? What are the differences you notice?
All the time. I mean, just very briefly going back to that policeman, because when he was asking for my details, he asked me, and I said the Quest, we were staying there, and he said, "What's your room number?" And I started to say something funny, camp, and then I stopped myself because it wasn't funny at all. And that's how conservative I think Adelaide is. It's like, oh, you can't just joke about these things. Like, he's just asked me for my room number. I was going to say something like, "Oh, that hasn't happened in a while," or whatever. Anyway, places like Hong Kong and like most of Asian cities, they don't clap during the show and make much noise, but they stand up at the end and go ballistic.
Oh, wow.
And then Melbourne, they didn't stand up at all. Melbourne just sat on their hands, and they did. It's not that they didn't enjoy it, but to get a standing ovation was difficult. And yet, this is a brilliant show, and these kids are like tap dancing their heads off, and it's, if Mary's flying, they're still not standing up. It's like, I can't understand. In London, they stand up. Like Les Mis always got standing ovations all around the country. Zurich was a bit strange like that. Zurich, maybe it's the language barrier in some countries. particularly if there are Sir titles on either side of the stage. But yeah, there definitely is a difference in etiquette and a different in audiences in different cities. And because Mary Poppins has never been to Adelaide or to Perth, where we're going, it probably will have a different reception than, say, Melbourne, where it was here 10 years ago and very successfully was here 10 years ago. So they know what to expect. They know when things pop out of the box and they know what's coming. Whereas here, people haven't seen it in their hometown. So they're probably not expecting, it's a different reaction, isn't it, if they don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I don't know why Melburnians would stay seated. Maybe they go to a lot of theatre and maybe they expect a lot.
But
I've got no
what I'm
idea
saying
why.
is they get a lot. Like what they were getting, it was really good. Like, I've seen it everywhere in the world, and I'm telling you, it's good. And I don't understand why. And even when I first went into the show, I had a show watch, and I stood up straight away. And usually, if you stand up, you allow people around you to stand up as well, because that they're not scared then to sort of get up. And nobody stood up. Not one person. I was like, oh, and I couldn't understand it, because the girl playing Mary Poppins is brilliant, and Bert is so good. Jack Chambers and Steph Jones, they're extraordinary, and you just go, what's happening here? But I think that Melbourne probably does get a lot of theatre, and it's probably they are probably quite conservative as well. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure either. Hey, Helen, we're running out of time. So see, I said we'd go over half an hour, didn't I? I said it.
Yeah, you did. And I was like, no, we won't.
No, I knew we'd go longer. Once people start talking, it's kind of easy just to relive those memories. But here's a question for you. All those shows you've done, traveling around the world, what is something you would like to tell yourself now as an older warrior woman? What would you like to say to that older warrior woman in you now that you know what the journey's been? If you could go right back to her when she was a child, what would you tell her?
Don't worry. Don't be insecure. You'll be fine. You'll land on your feet. You'll be absolutely fine. We all have so much stress and anxiety because we're in fear of what we don't know or what hasn't happened, and it's just fear that we're in fear of. You may as well just own it. What's the point in being negative about it if you can think positive and just go, nothing's happened yet, so don't be anxious. So I think there's a lot of anxiety that comes with performing to a lot of people, especially young ones now. They have, they've got a lot to deal with. And you just have to get up there and do it and just know that you're good and know that you're there for a reason and not compare yourself to other people. And the only competition you have is with yourself. I think that's what I tell her.
Helen Walsh, we've come to the end of our podcast. So I've only one thing to say to you, and that is, Helen Walsh, this has been your 15 minutes of fame.
Thank you, Noel. It's been lovely to chat.
If you enjoyed this podcast, Noel Anderson's 15 Minutes of Fame, remember to subscribe and share.